nerds, what's up? After reading all of George R. R. Martin's bibliography last year and ranking it, I told you guys that I really wanted to do a retrospective where I talked about how all of his works kind of led up to his magnum opus, which is often considered A Song of Ice and Fire. So today I'm really excited to present that research to you and present my thoughts about kind of a deep dive on how A Song of Ice and Fire came to be through the lens of George R. R. Martin's entire career up until that point. So I really hope you enjoyed this discussion with Read by Kyle and learned something new. So here is Kyle by Read by Kyle. Thank you for joining us today. And I was hoping you could just introduce your experience with A Song of Ice and Fire, because the whole reason I've obviously brought you here is you've been a fan for decades.
Well, thank you, Book One. I don't like that it has been decades, but I guess that is technically true at this point, unfortunately. So like a lot of A Song of Ice and Fire fans, I watched the first episode of the show. I was like, whoa, this is crazy. Went and got the books from the library and like read the first four, like before the first 4 or 5 episodes it aired, and that became like my new obsession. Reread the books quite a few times right in the beginning, and then like was on westeros.org and Winter's Coming and all the fan sites, and was really heavily invested in the theory community for a long time, and then just kind of took a step back because I felt like we weren't making enough progress, and the theories were getting a little too out there for me. People were just, getting very cynical and stuff. So I just took a step back, and then Fire and Blood came out. And I thought that it really reminded me of how much I love the lore and the world and the history of Westeros and how lived in it felt. So that kind of brought me back into the fold in terms of like looking up at theories and stuff like that. And for the longest time, I only read like A Song of Ice and Fire, which was crazy to me because I would always say George R. R. Martin is my favorite author, and I just never read any of his other stuff. And then last year I read Sand Kings and The Ice Dragon and the novella Night Flyers. And I was like, oh, wow, he's like really good at other stuff. So then this year I made it a goal to read all of his backlog, most of his backlog. Like most of his short stories are in the Dream Song collections, but I didn't get like all of the odds and ends short stories. And, I made it like a read along on my channel, and I brought on people to like kind of get a little bit more spotlight on his older stuff, because everybody does the same thing. They all just read A Song of Ice and Fire, or if they read something else, maybe they pick up Fever Dream, maybe. But it just felt like a good opportunity to kind of go back and look at the history of my favorite author and actually like appreciate his work beyond just A Song of Ice and Fire. And, I talked to you about it, and you were kind of thinking about doing the same thing. So we mostly followed the same reading order and read most of the books together, except now that we're done, it's like, we've just, I think, both gotten this like much deeper appreciation of Martin's backlog and how good of a writer he is, and how, well, obviously, I mean, A Song of Ice and Fire is my favorite like thing on the planet. So like, that's obviously the thing I care about the most. It's just appreciating all these other types of stories that he's told and all of his other skills and the stuff that has kind of gotten lost by the wayside a bit. So
yeah, and I agree on all of that. And I was going to say, though, how many times have you read A Song of Ice and Fire? Because I feel like that's also really important context for today's
So I say that I've read the series 7 times, and I've read Storm of Swords 8 times. It's probably more. Like, that's like where I can completely remember. Like, I did a for sure read, but like, I used to just like pick up random parts or like just reread a Game of Thrones or whatever. So those like early post high school days are hard to remember how many I was reading, but I think 7, and I'm going to start a reread again next month. So
yeah, so I feel like that's the important thing, because I feel, as you'll see as we talk, I was like, when we were doing this project together, which actually was last year, because it is January, unfortunately. So you read that stuff 2 years ago.
I'm still on 2025 time. Yeah, I don't know.
And we did that last year. Like, every time we were talking about all the stories and books, you'd be like, no. This is like a direct inspiration for Song of Ice and Fire because of here. And so I feel like I'm the new fan perspective and you're like the deep in it perspective. So we're just going to go through kind of his life. And if you haven't read Dream Songs, that's what kind of helped inform this a lot, because Dream Songs is kind of a retrospective through his life. So, yep. Okay. That just ended. So we're gonna start with his pre-career. And basically Martin got his start loving comics as a kid, which I think is super interesting, because I feel like that's such a common thing to hear about fantasy and sci-fi authors in Martin's peer group. And I don't feel like we hear about it as much today. So I'm always curious, like, because his big thing was comics and writing fanzines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I am not a big comics fan, so all the stuff that we learned in Dream Songs was really interesting to me. I know there's like other authors that have gotten their start there. I also thought it was really, really cool that he was at the first ever Comic-Con. That's just like interesting lore that just is like, oh, of course he would be.
Crazy.
Like, it's just so
I
yeah,
actually, that's important to me because I think like as an outsider, like so many people paint him as this really grumpy old dude, which like I'm not saying he doesn't get curmudgeon sometimes, but like we got to see him both at Worldcon. And like this is a man who goes to Worldcon every year, not the most prestigious of cons or anything like that, but it is the place where people deeply love SFF. And I feel like if you look at his whole career and you look how he is now, like this is a man who loves the genre and has been there through a lot of the inceptions of the genre and like really knows kind of his way around that stuff.
absolutely. And like, not to talk too much about Worldcon, but if we think about the three like events that he did at Worldcon. Like one was like a history or retrospective of fantasy, which like, the with like Brandon Sanderson and Ryan Cahill and all those guys. And then he also did one on the history of sci-fi that was really great. I was at that one. And like, the whole time he was just talking about, these like older authors that were like, kind of either forgotten or like not forgotten, but like respected, but maybe not is in the mainstream, and how much they were like inspiring him and stuff like that. And then the third one he did was the Howard Waldrop like films that he had produced, the
Yeah, and
short
I've
films.
gone to
And
that with
so,
you.
yeah. And so he was like, everything he was doing was like to celebrate other people. Like, and I know like, the cynics might be because, oh, it's because he doesn't have a book to talk about. But I just think it's like, it's indicative of who he is. Like he talks about all of these things. And when we met him in line, like what he said to us was like, hey, make sure you guys come see the Howard Wold. Like he was just like wanted more people to see these stories. So he's just like a giant fan of the genre. And I think that is very important to mention.
Yeah, and I think it's true. And I think because of disappointment, like people have lost sight of it a lot, like how much he really does deeply love the genre. Um, but I mean, we'll talk about that more as we get on. But his first ever published thing was Meet the Executioner, and it was in a fanzine in 1965. I think that's interesting. I don't think that was included in the stories though.
No, it
So
wasn't. And the early stories in this are like not good. And I say that
no.
not even mean, like it's clearly he's just trying to sort out his process, which, you know, every author had to write. You think of like Brandon Sanderson or any of these other authors who talk about their career and how they got to where they are, and they show you their early writing. It's never that good in
Mm-mm.
comparison to what it is. And so these early stories that George wrote and showed us are just kind of like nothing. Like, and I do not mean that rudely. Like you can
No.
see he still
And
has
they're
like a
not
good turn of,
bad. Like
yeah,
you can't point to them and be like, it's terrible. They're just
yeah,
literally nothing.
he still has like good like turn of phrase. Like there's parts where I could be like, oh, like if somebody was like submitting that as like an assignment, which I think one of them literally was an assignment, or like
Yes, we need to
just
talk about that.
a friend of yours was, I would be like, oh yeah, this is really good. But when you think of like George R.R. Martin, it's like, oh, this
Mhm.
is he's just learning his craft, which is, so I think it was really interesting that he put those in there and like let people see the evolution.
Yeah, and my favorite one I wanted to talk about in this early was The Fortress because it's just such a wild thing, which he submitted it as a history paper,
Yeah.
right? It was like for his history class. And was it high school or college? That's what I can't remember.
I think it was college. I feel like it was college.
College. Yeah, I think it was college. And he was like, I just want to like do a historical fiction almost account of what we're learning about. And it's like this story version of it, which is
It's barely historical fiction. Like it's basically like here's
yes.
like he makes the conversations, but
Maybe
it's very dry.
dramatized account. That's what it
Yes,
is. It's
yeah.
a dramatized account of
Very
a true
Eric
event.
Larson for sure.
Yeah, and that is so funny to me because I do think it's like, oh, just from the very beginning, I feel like that's a staple of George. Like when you think of A Song of Ice and Fire and how much like how rooted in history it is and how much inspiration he takes from all those things, it was so interesting to me to see like, wow, from the very get-go, his writing had that flavor. I mean, he went to school for journalism. Like, and I think you see that influence in a lot of his writing.
Yeah, I think that was my favorite thing about what we did is that like whether or not I loved a story or whether or not I loved a book, I pretty much always saw the building blocks and the stepping stones to A Song of Ice and Fire. And, obviously an artist's journey is not going to be like, I'm going to write this so that one day I could write but it is interesting in retrospect. Like I think almost every single short story has something that he reused or was tooling with. And sometimes it's direct things, like it's like character names, but sometimes
Mhm.
it's like, oh, this is where he learned a little bit more about how to do setting very well. And The
Mhm.
Fortress definitely feels like, I mean, that could have been like a part about like Stannis, going to attack another like place in the Riverlands or something like that. So it's like, it's so interesting that even back then he was thinking like about the history of everything.
Yeah, and wanting to write it in a creative way. Like he didn't want to
Yeah.
write an essay, he wanted to write this dramatized thing. So then we move into his early career, which would be the 1970s. That's the first decade, really, of his career, with his first sold story in 1971 with The Hero, which is a good story. I liked The Hero.
I like The Hero a lot. I think I liked it more than you. Like, I really, really liked The Hero. I thought the world building of it is so like sparse, but also very interesting. Like it asks you questions the whole way through, and then the ending and just kind of like ends, and you're like, what's going on here? And you don't get any information, which
No, I think
tends
The
to
Hero
be,
is the one I really liked because you got no information. Wasn't I
I
always
don't know.
complaining that you got too much information? I don't remember. We read this. It's
I
like
don't know.
hard.
Yeah,
They went together.
it's really difficult. But yeah, you have recently decided that if anybody gives you literally any information, you're like, this is a bad story. So, um, but yeah, no, I thought that would have made sense too. Like as we were going through, and that was like the first published one, and there's a couple before that, and this one was like, oh, this is the first one where I'm like, this is a good story. Like it made me feel emotions, and I'm like, okay, like we're getting there, So
Yeah, and that's exactly how I remember feeling. I was like, we had these stories, and this one's like, oh, okay. And what's interesting is the next few stories he sold, The Exit to San Breda, which was 1972, and then The Second Kind of Loneliness and When Morning Comes Mistfall, both in 1973. What I thought was interesting, it was like we hit sci-fi, fantasy, and horror. And it was like those beginning stories literally define his career almost. Like those are the three genres he wrote in. I saw so much of like what he ended up being known for. Like we both loved When Morning Comes Mistfall, which is like super atmospheric. But then like The Second Kind of Loneliness is literally all character driven. Just this super interesting, like you have a single character is the whole thing. And it's just an internal monologue. And it's like already in his earlier work, it's so interesting with him because I don't think this is necessarily true of every author. You see like the direct brick that got you to the next spot.
Mm-hmm. Now that you said it, Morning Comes Mistfall is the one you didn't like that much by the end. Like, not didn't like that much, but you were like, oh, the ending explained too much.
4.5,
sure,
Kyle.
Sure. But you were just like, oh my God, they explained things at the end. And I was like, that's not a sin. But that was the one that you, no, I thought those stories were all great for different reasons. And Second Kind of Loneliness is the first one that I think I was like, wow. Like, and because I'm a character driven person. Like, so when I'm reading, that's what gives me emotion is character. And so I'm just like, oh my God, this one was really good. I think that's like my favorite for a while. Like I'm going to look real quick, but I feel like, Windhaven. But apart from Windhaven, I think that Second Kind of Loneliness is my favorite of his short stories until Sand Kings, which is quite a bit later. So he like really peaked early for me in that story for like a few years.
Yeah, and it's interesting to like and how well it holds up. It doesn't feel like early writing. Like what I should say is Dream Songs isn't necessarily chronological. It like sometimes is, but it sometimes isn't across the two volumes. And I mean, I know you know this for the people watching. So I actually, if you see us look to the side, I made this huge document where I actually went and dated every single thing and put them in order. And it kind of shocks me how early some of the works are that I think are some of the best works he wrote. Like he really has consistent quality through his whole career. Even if I don't like everything, there is something every part of his career that I love. And A Song for Laia was next in 1974, which both of you and I thought was good.
I thought it was good. Like I admit this is like the most disappointing one for me. And
me
people
too.
are gonna, but I thought it was good. Like I just think people talk about it a
It
lot.
was
I think it's
disappointing because it was hyped so much. We really thought it was going to change our lives.
And wasn't it the first one? Yeah, it's the first one that won an award. Like it's the first time he won an award. And
oh yes, you're right.
yeah, and so I just was expecting a little bit more. And now to be fair, it is really hard to go backwards because I think it's a concept of like, do we want to talk about the concept of it?
Yeah, totally.
Okay. The concept of like, this alien hive mind situation is something that I've seen done before. And that's not George's fault. And it predated George too, but it's just like I've seen it done a lot now. And so for this one to have hit more, I think I needed just a little bit more with it. And I thought some of the character interactions were just a little fast. So I maybe needed like 5 or 10 more pages with this one. And then ironically, like right after we read that, Pluribus came out, and I was like, oh, we're doing this again. And so it's just, it's a concept that's been done a lot now. So it's like, that's not George's fault that it failed to wow me because of that. But yeah, that's still very early in his career. And think of like how many people now still like you need to read Song for Laya. Like, it's so great. And it's like, that was 50 years ago that he wrote that, which
Oh my
is
gosh.
insane to think
Yeah,
of.
the 1970s were 50 years ago.
I know, we're old.
Crazy.
Yeah.
That's
we're
crazy.
Not 50, but we're old.
We're not 50, but we're old. Yeah, because he had the Second Kind of Loneliness, which we said was the first one that we were like, wow, that's amazing, was the first thing that got nominated for him for a Locus. But yeah, Song for Laya was nominated for a Nebula, Locust, and a Hugo, and it won the Hugo. Mm-hmm. And then what's really interesting to me is, so Kyle and I read Windhaven as the combined Windhaven novel, which didn't come out, let me see here. When did that didn't come out until 1981. And so I forgot that they were written separately. And so seeing the first Windhaven novella come so early in his career in 1975, in case this is the first video you've come to, Kyle and I have like single-handedly started a revolution about how Windhaven is
excellent. You heard it here first. You guys go see George. You tell him. The two of us. Yeah.
No, you can't go tell George that. That's my thing. That's my thing. I tell George that it's the best thing he's ever written.
No. Tell George that we started the revolution.
Oh, that's what I mean. Started the revolution for Windhaven. Yeah. It's so incredible. And he co-wrote that with Lisa Tuttle. But again, just seeing how early it was, and that won the Locus. I don't know, it blows me away. And I do think, again, in Windhaven, that first novella, you already, like, it. I need to go read some Lisa Tuttle. Neither of us have.
Yeah.
But it feels very George. And again, Windhaven to me was like, oh, it's that deep character work. It's the making things interesting when there isn't necessarily traditional action. I mean, I read that book in like 30 hours. Like, I couldn't put it down, but I can't, it's not like it's all like emotional action, I guess I would say.
That first part of Windhaven is so good. And I'm just like looking at the stuff that came around it, which is all still good. But I'm just like, man, the two of them were the secret sauce early in his career, because that first novella of Windhaven, I'm like,
well, and also,
incredible.
I mean, I guess it wasn't the first novella, but if we think of Windhaven as a whole, like also the melancholic ending, that's very satisfying and fulfilling, but isn't like 100% happy. I come to associate that with George a lot. Like,
I might have made this up, so if I'm wrong, I will own it. But I think I read somewhere, it might have been in Dream Songs or on a blog post somewhere, that he had wanted the ending of the first novella to be more melancholy, and Lisa talked him out of it. I think that's what happened. I could be wrong.
No, I think that was the blog post we read where they talked about the process, because I remember that too.
Okay, so then I'm not crazy. So that is more on brand. And he was like, what if people were in pain? And then Lisa's like, let's dial it back. We want to win some awards here, Georgie.
Yeah, and I think that's super interesting. And then he, during this time is when he had his first novel, which was Dying of the Light in 1977. To be clear, we're not talking about every story.
Yeah,
it would take too long.
So
yeah, maybe I will put up a graphic when we talk about the career, so you can see what stuff we're skipping over. But so Dying of the Light was his first novel, and neither you or I were crazy about the novel. We didn't dislike it, but we weren't crazy about it.
I'm close to disliking it. You were much higher on it than me. I remember we had like several conversations where you were trying to tell me the good in it, and I'm like, yeah, that's fine. Like, it's fine. Like, I just don't. I'm not being like a hater on purpose. Like, I think the world building stuff is still excellent. Like, I actually think like there's like little tidbits of stuff dropped in that book that I think are excellent. Like, he's always been this really intricate like planner in terms of how things come together. I just didn't like a lot of the character interactions, and like I just didn't. It just felt very janky to me. Now, I will say I want to reread Dying of the Light more than books that I liked a lot more, because I read it on this like really bold-faced type, and I really hated it. And then I switched to audio, and then the audio wasn't really doing it for me either, because like it's Ian Glenn, who's Jorah Mormont in Game of Thrones, which he has a great voice, but it was just like it didn't fit that story to me or something. I don't know. I could see myself totally turning around on this if I reread it in a situation where I wasn't getting like headaches from looking at the text. So But
Yeah, I didn't find Dying of the Light necessarily like super enjoyable as like did I enjoy reading this, but I just loved the thematic elements in it, which is always like I always score that high, I feel like.
yeah, I think that's
Which
the
is
biggest
why
difference between our tastes is that like
yeah.
themes can really push you higher, and I'm just like, just not there.
Yeah, so it's like even if I don't enjoy the experience, if it has really good themes, like I'll knock it up. So that was Dying of the Light. And like again, I feel like thematically, he was trying to put so much in there. Like he was always writing stuff. You know, he didn't write like a ton of pulp stuff. When I'm looking back at this list, like some of it was, but his stuff I feel like is all pretty rooted in an idea, which is why I think he hits for me so much. Like even in the stuff I don't like, it feels like I have this strong idea and I'm trying to
I mean,
represent it
what would you
through.
consider pulpy? I don't know if I would consider any of his stuff pulpy.
Well, that's why I just didn't want to say a strong statement. I said
Right.
barely
Yeah.
any, barely
Yeah. I
any of
mean,
his stuff.
well,
Well, I just feel like
one
someone's
thing
going to
we
come
didn't
back and be like,
mention.
well,
Yeah, that's true. One thing we didn't mention is that neither of us have read Wild Cards besides the like he did a little couple blurbs of like chapters of it in Dream Songs. Bookborn, do you want to talk about your thoughts on Wild Cards and why you didn't want to read them?
being so called out right now. I didn't want to read Wild Cards because it sounded not for me. It
Okay.
sounded dumb.
That's fair. And I was going to read them. I just didn't want to like read them all that quickly. And so I was like collecting them. And we just didn't read them. But I will say that sounds pulpier. Like I wonder if maybe he was channeling his more like comic booky pulpy side on like
Except
editing
for the
and
fact,
writing.
like, I read those wild card. Well, we're not there yet. We should wait. But I read those wild card things, and like, it convinced me to go read wild cards because I thought they were so good. And then I
They're
thought,
excellent.
is it only because
He's a
it's
great
George?
writer.
Or
But I think the concept of it is very pulpy, right? It's like, it's like superheroes and
but I
stuff
still
like
feel like
that.
there was a lot there, is what I'm saying. Like, I just don't know if he knows how to write stuff that doesn't have like thematic elements.
What you're saying is you think he's a good author. You're putting pulp as this like it means it's bad, and I'm putting pulp as like fast paced, like we're just in and out kind of like.
I have fun. I like some popcorn pulpy reads.
Guys,
I just think it's
she's lying to
interesting.
you right now. She's lying to you.
I liked The Martian.
Okay, that's fair.
I
liked
engineering
though. Engineering. There you go.
I liked Project Hail Mary less than The Martian, so maybe that is like a point in your favor somewhere.
Yeah, and Project Hail Mary is more fun. Anyway, we're getting off topic. It's really hard for me to not just make fun of Bookbarn, but
it's fine.
We're here for a reason, guys.
Great thematic elements. And then very soon after, in 1979, one of like his first highlight of his career, and I feel like if you get rid of A Song of Ice and Fire, the thing most talked about, like you've told me, the thing most talked about his career, which was Sand Kings, which did win the Locust, Nebula, and the Hugo Award.
Yeah, which is one of the only things to have ever done that, I think. I don't know the history of those, but it's a rare elite company. And Sand Kings is phenomenal, just incredibly good. And I reread it for this because I just wanted to reread it. Like I didn't reread Night Flyers because I was like, I read it and it's good. But Sand Kings on reread is just as gripping. It's just as good. And I was a little nervous for you because Bookborn and horror, not simpatico, generally speaking. And then we read that earlier. There's like a couple earlier horror short stories, and you didn't like dislike them by any means, but you're like, yeah, it's like good. It's like okay, like you weren't blown away. And I was like, well, Sand Kings is really, and nope, you were just in it. So that was awesome to see.
No, I don't even remember. I messaged you after Sand Kings being like, this is the best thing I've read. Like it was so good. And what we should talk about is like, you have Windhaven again, which is like sci-fi, and Sand Kings is horror. And we're gonna talk about the Ice Dragon, which is fantasy. So he was winning, winning awards for things in those three genres consistently, like, and he really blends them. And what I think is interesting is I do think he blends all three in A Song of Ice and Fire. Obviously, A Song of Ice and Fire is a high fantasy novel, but I think it was you actually, after I had my total Red Wedding crash out, you had said, was it you or someone else who said he wrote the Red Wedding chapter as a short story? It like reads like a horror short story.
That sounds like something I would say. I don't specifically like remember saying it, so it could have been somebody else. But the building of tension over it is like really gripping, and I think that like you're getting those feelings of dread in the Red Wedding, and there's actually plenty of tension building like that in A Song of Ice and Fire that I do think comes from this early and mid-career horror writing, because like horror is all about building tension. And so, that creeping dread in The Red Wedding, where you're, getting like little bits and pieces of things, you're like, no, something's wrong, but you don't know what's going on. And then it builds and builds and builds. That's definitely like the repertoire of a horror author. And so I think,
and I think just like how good he is at writing a short story, which I think is so interesting because he is known for like this high fantasy series that's 800, 900 pages a book. And then it's like, no, the man knows how to get a story in and out. And Sand Kings is like, I think I read it in one sitting.
Mm-hmm.
I like.
And one thing we should talk about, I guess now is a good time, is just like how much of a genre blender he is. And he had some good quotes about that maybe you can pull up if you have a second, where he's talking about like fantasy, sci-fi, and horror kind of all blend together, and they all like build on each other, and like they're different aspects of different types of storytelling. And I mean, you can see he blends horror and fantasy in A Song of Ice and Fire all the time. And I also think there's like some horror elements in some of his like short stories, like In the Lost Lands, and I think it was The Glass Flower, maybe. But like fantasy stories that have like horror tinge, but he really loves the concept of sci-fi with horror, and he blends those all the time. And Sand Kings, Night Flyers, there's a bunch of like shorter stories. The Hero, I would even kind of classify as having horror elements. So it's something that's always in his mind, that he's just like a storyteller and building these building blocks of different genres and pulling from them, which I think is really interesting because people love to box things in. And, people think, I saw a comment recently where somebody was like, it was like on Reddit or something. People were like, oh, George, maybe he can't finish A Song of Ice and Fire because he's never written fantasy before. And he was mainly known as a sci-fi author. And I was like, what? Like,
we have lost the ancient receipts. I got a ton of comments on my thing. Well, why would you ever want to read an author who's never written an ending? And I said, never written an ending? What are you talking about? He hasn't ended A Song of Ice and Fire. He knows how to write an ending.
It is very funny. There's like a little essay first of all, I totally agree with you. But there is an essay in Dream Songs where he's like, oh, my series.
No, we got to bring that up later. We got to cut that out. That's got to be our ending thing.
Okay.
That's too good. Yeah, I have the quote on hand, actually, that you were talking about, Kyle. It says, we can make up all the definitions of science fiction and fantasy and horror that we want. We can draw our boundaries and make our labels. But in the end, it's still the same old story, the one about the human heart in conflict with itself. The rest, my friends, is furniture. The house of fantasy is built of stone and wood and furnished in high medieval. Its people travel by horse and galley, fight with sword and spell and battle axe, communicate by palantir or raven, and break bread with elves and dragons. The house of science fiction is built of duralloy and plastic and furnished in faux future. Its people travel by starship and air car, fight with nukes and tailored germs, communicate by Ansible and laser, and break protein bars with aliens. The house of horror is built of bone and cobwebs and furnished in ghastly gothic. Its people travel only by night, fight with anything that will kill messily, communicate in screams and shrieks and gibbers, and sip blood with vampires and werewolves. The furniture rule, I call it. Forget the definition. Furniture rules.
He's a good writer. Maybe he should write some books.
Crazy. Once we read that, or once I read that quote in Dream Songs, it really did kind of change my perspective on a lot of his writing, because it's so true when you think of A Song of Ice and Fire. Like, the furniture is fantasy, but there are so many elements, which I think is what he's trying to say here. Like, he borrows from all the other elements, but has just dressed it in the fantasy furniture.
Yeah, absolutely. And, just the idea that people can be snobby about like one genre or the other. And it's like, I just like really encourage people, just generally, even beyond George, just like try some other genres that have influenced your favorite genres. Because even if you don't like that genre, it might make you appreciate the stuff that you do like more. So like, say you don't read any horror, but you love A Song of Ice and Fire, dipping your toes in like maybe some Martin short stories or some other horror writers might make you appreciate some of the writing in A Song of Ice and Fire better. Like, for instance, with The Red Wedding and how that's like built upon like horror tropes and many other things. Like the stuff with Melisandre is pretty much all straight horror stuff and things like that. So
for sure. And I mean, reading his short stories is what made me tell you that I was going to dip my toe in horror. Like, that combined with the fact that I read a couple of Stephen Kings I liked this year, I was like, oh, maybe this genre I thought was not for me at all. Like, maybe there are parts of it that are.
Yeah, now I will say, and we're skipping ahead a little bit in his career, but I don't think he liked body horror, which does not surprise me at all, because there's like a couple stories that he did that were body horror.
Found in Kitchen. Bookborn doesn't like body horror.
You were out. And I was like, these are so interesting and uncomfortable, and you're like, it's no for me, dog. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, we're not surprised by that at all. And then rounding out the 1970s is The Ice Dragon in 1979. That's when it was written. And then it was published in 1980, and then it won an award in 2004 when it was republished in the illustrated version. But I'm putting it in
No, I
1979.
mean, it was written in the 70s. So, yeah.
But ironically, this is the first non A Song of Ice and Fire thing I read of George's. And this was really what made me want to read his whole bibliography, because I was like, oh, here's this other thing that's incredible, because we both love the Ice Dragon.
Yeah. Yeah, my wife just read The Ice Dragon, and she's been like categorically refused. She's like watched Game of Thrones, and she just like didn't want to read the books. And I've just been trying for years.
I almost had her convinced.
You know, you can take some credit, but I got her to read the Ice Dragon, and she thought it was really good. And then now I've gotten her. She's started Dunk and Egg, so hopefully that'll be the gateway. But yes, you did halfway convince her. So
halfway, I was almost there. Yeah, the Ice Dragon, I read in like an hour on an airplane and cried. It's just really great. And one thing I think is super fun is he has this quote that like he feels that the Ice Dragon is his big contribution to fantasy in terms of like fauna, because he said like the Ice Dragon that he made in that story, that didn't exist before. There had been like dragons that lived in icy places, but never a dragon that like breathed cold and was icy, which I think is fun.
Yeah, I think that's cool. And also, we'll bring this up because otherwise other people will. I mean, they will anyway. But a lot of people like theorize that this could be set in Westeros, or like, you know, because like there's also ice dragons mentioned in prophecies in A Song of Ice and Fire and stuff. And I think that's really interesting to consider. Like, I do not in any way think this story is canon to A Song of Ice and Fire, but I do think that if he does bring in ice dragons, like, will they be ice dragons more traditionally, or will he be like, because, you know, we think about all the stepping stones that we've been talking about to A Song of Ice and Fire. It's not done yet. So there's still things that he obviously wants to include in the series. And so it's like, maybe if the series is finished and you go back and you look at the Ice Dragon, you're like, oh, this is the first time he introduced this idea of an Ice Dragon, but we literally get that in like A Dream of Spring or something. You know what I mean? Like, it's interesting to think of what his plan might be.
Let's manifest it.
Ice dragons have been mentioned in the series. So,
because think about like the idea of it turning into spring and then you have a winter dragon. Interesting. There's stuff there.
Mm-hmm. People will flood the comments with theories, I'm sure.
I'm sure we won't have any problem. Before we move on to his to the 1980s, just as like an overview here, he got a 5-year like master's in journalism, and then couldn't get hired. Like, he thought he was going to get hired and could not get a job as a journalist. And so he said, you know, maybe if he had gotten that job, his life would have turned out differently. And it said, during the next decade, I would find myself directing chess tournaments and teaching college, but those were the only things I did to pay the rent. After the summer of 71, when people asked me what I was, I always said a writer. So he considers the summer of 1971 to be the turning point of his life, because his journalism degree didn't get him as many doors open as he thought. So
this goes without saying and can be said for anybody, but I just like, when I hear things like that, it just makes me think of like, there's some guy in, you know, 1971 or 72 that was looking at a stack of resumes, and he's like, should I get this George Martin guy? Or, well, you know, Tom Berenger, just he has one extra reference. And if he just decided to go the other way, we wouldn't have A Song of Ice and Fire. Like, it's just like these entirely little moments in life that like change.
Did you ever see the movie Sliding Doors?
No.
Okay. Well, it's a sliding door.
That's actually the first and only time you're going to say, have you seen a movie? And you've seen it and I haven't seen it, because you don't watch movies.
Literally, a butterfly just flapped its wings. We might have caused a tornado with that statement. I've seen a movie.
I've seen The Butterfly Effect, okay, which you wouldn't watch because it's a horror movie.
Yeah, I do know what The Butterfly Effect is, though, so it's fine. So then we go into the 1980s, which I call his career plus Hollywood era. And we'll get why he went to Hollywood. But just some like high level, this is when the second Windhaven novella came out. It's when Night Flyers came out. It's when the collection of Windhaven Together in 1981 came out. That was all in the early 80s. And then his second and third novels, Fever Dream and The Armageddon Rag.
There's a background thing that we have to consider with this here, which is a young man born the same year as our friend George R.R. Martin, named Stevie King. And he got very popular a couple of years before this. And George talked about this. Everybody wanted horror. Horror was the new thing. And George just happened to have been writing some horror. So you can really see the shift to horror. And that's not to say he stopped writing sci-fi, stopped writing fantasy. Like, I mean, I think The Way of Cross and Dragon is like 1980, which, I mean, that's an excellent story about, I mean, that's like a sci-fi story, but it has like elements of fantasy, and like it really deals with like religious faith and stuff that I feel like he really templated into A Song of Ice and Fire later with like the Seven and the varying religious factions. So it's not like he abandoned anything, but you can see the publisher shift of like, hey, we should get you writing more horror, because he does a bunch of horror in the next like 5 years. And 2 of his next novels are horror. So I think that's a big shift, both in like the landscape of what people wanted and also what he shifted his focus to.
Yeah, it's actually really good background to know about that. And it's interesting to think of those things. I mean, we already talked about Windhaven. We love Windhaven. Windhaven is excellent.
Yes.
It only got nominated for a Locus and didn't win anything, and that's their fault. They missed out. But Fever Dream is his next full-length novel, so his second one. And
I feel like we should talk about Night Flyers first. Night Flyers is a pretty.
We can talk about Night Flyers first. What do you want to say?
Just because you think it's mid. Well, I just want to acknowledge that it exists. But you wanted to talk about Dying of the Light, which is way more mid.
Okay.
Night Flyers is really good. It has a TV show. It's like one of the only 2 things of his that has a TV show.
Okay. You
just saying,
talk about Night Flyers then.
I don't know. Like, now I'm off kilter.
So you have nothing to say about Night Flyers.
No, I'm saying that you were just like, we're gonna skip the shit that I don't like. So yeah, so I mean, but with Night Flyers, you know, I read somewhere, and I don't know where I read it, so I don't know for sure if it's attributed to George, but this idea that somebody thought that horror and sci-fi couldn't be merged, and that's like he was writing a lot of stories to like prove that to people, and then like, I guess I'm not a film buff because I cannot remember when the movie Alien came out, and I know that you won't know. Do you know when the movie Alien came out?
I have Google.
You do have Google. Anyway, while you're looking it up, I will continue.
1979.
Okay, I thought it was around this time. I wasn't sure if it was before or after. You can see that like this, it's basically the concept of Alien, just like done differently, which is like these people on a ship and things are happening that like it's creepy and they don't know what's going on and people start dying and stuff like that. Obviously, Alien does an entirely different thing with it, but the idea of these people on a ship that they're not sure what's going on, and like the idea that it's really scary to be out in space and there's nothing that you can do to get help. And so I thought that was like it's not one of my favorite things that he's ever written, but I did think it was a very excellent builder of tension throughout it. And there was different character voices in it that I thought were really good. And I think it's one of the earlier books where he's really good at different character voices, because a lot of his stuff before that is just one POV. And so it's like, if you read multiple things of his, you're going to be like, oh, he's really good with POV or like with different character voices. But I don't think there's much before that has different character voices within it. And so it's really interesting to see like the switch being like this person, like there's like Celeste, which is just like, she's really annoying. And then there's like all these other characters, and there's the captain. And then like everybody's just very clearly defined. And I thought that was like a really excellent building block for A Song of Ice and Fire in terms of like making the POVs very distinct.
Yeah. And actually, before you even said that, the thought popped in my head, like this is the first book where you had like a cast of characters that was big enough that you needed to really be able to keep them straight. And he's able for you to do that. So yeah, I think that is true. That's interesting. Like now that I'm looking at all these other ones, like, oh, he didn't really play around with multiple perspectives again for a little bit after that. So that's kind of interesting. Well, now we can move to Fever Dream, which we both thought was excellent.
Yeah, Fever Dream's incredible, guys. People weren't kidding about that one.
So good. And Fever Dream is horror. I mean, it's a vampire novel, but again, it's like he's really good at just taking a very known subject and making it so interesting. Actually, you don't even know this because I forgot to message you about this last night. Just last night, the friend I lent Fever Dream to a friend like 4 weeks ago, and I thought maybe I was wrong. And she came last night to our book club and said, I started it yesterday and I finished it yesterday.
Oh, wow.
She sat down and finished the whole book in one day.
That's good. That's better than me. She's going to be on the next stream talking about how she's the biggest George R. R. Martin fan.
She has never read any of his other stuff. I just gave it to her because she kind of likes horror and she likes classics a lot. And I feel like it does read a little bit like a classic in some ways.
That. Yeah, it's old. Also, you said recently you don't like historical fiction. And while this is clearly also fantasy and horror, I would like to point out this is in fact historical fiction.
I never say I don't like historical fiction because I've had too many historical fiction books that work. It's just not a preferred genre. That's what I say. It's not a preferred genre.
That's fine.
No, this is all about boats. This actually reminds me of The Fortress. And then he's like, hey, I know a lot about steamboats, and now you'll know a lot about steamboats too. Isn't that fun?
I know that I've talked to you about this, and I cannot remember the answer to the question. Did you ever watch the video of him telling the actress for Shay about like showing him all his trains?
No, you told me about this, and I immediately said I will not be watching that. But thank you for telling me
No,
because
you really, it's so good. It's just this earnest old man being like, and then I have this train. It's good. It's really good. But the man just like he's a nerd. Like, and I say that lovingly. Like, he just likes nerdy
we're
shit.
all nerds if we're
Yeah,
here.
exactly. Yeah, and he loves trains, and mercifully he did not subject me to a train book, but he did subject me to a steamboat book, which I thought was very, very good. So
Yeah. And it's kind of because my friend said the same thing I did. She's like, at first they're talking about the steamboats, and I'm like, who cares? Who cares? And then she's like, but then by the end, you're like, oh, I get it. I get why he did all of that and why it means something. And yeah, Fever Dream is great.
one like very weird like change or like not change parallel to A Song of Ice and Fire that I think is interesting is he makes you care about Fever Dream in the same way that he makes you care about dragons in A Song of Ice and Fire,
Yeah.
which is interesting. Like obviously dragons are living creatures. There's already that built in like it's alive,
I
so it
mean,
has
I'm
a
going to go one
personality.
step further because to me, Fever Dream reminded me of how he made me care about Winterfell.
Oh, that's a really good one too.
Because I
Yeah.
said Winterfell, I remember after I read Clash of Kings, I was like, I didn't realize that Winterfell was a character to me. And now that this thing has happened,
Hmm.
I'm upset as if this was a person. And that's how
Yeah.
I felt about, oh, sorry, Fever Dream's the boat. I feel like we should say that.
Yeah,
Fever
yeah.
Dream's
Fever
the
Dream is the
boat.
name of the boat that they build. And like, at the beginning he's talking about how much he really wanted this great boat, and then they build it, and then yeah, like and it becomes a character. And like I was comparing it to dragons because they're more there's more of them,
Yeah,
but like
yeah.
yeah, it's interesting that like he takes every aspect of a story and like puts intentionality into what is going on with that. And I think we skipped over some of the stories that really enhances like feeling of setting, but maybe
Mhm,
now is a good time to bring that up where
for sure.
there's plenty of his stories where like the atmosphere of the story is what is the point, and it's just people like in a forest or a wasteland or a
Mhm.
tundra, and it's like there's interesting things going on in there, but what's really there is you feel like you're there. And I think A Song of Ice and Fire builds on that so well. You get all these building blocks because every place in Westeros and Essos and Southros and anywhere we see in that world feels so real and lived in, and you can smell it and taste it and feel it. And it's all of these like little aspects he takes so seriously. And people love to hate on Martin for a lot of things, but the man cares. And that's what really gets to me is not like when people are mad that the books aren't out, like I get it. Like I also really want them. Like I get it. But when people suggest he doesn't care, I'm like, I just don't think like you're thinking about like what this man cares too much. Like that's actually the problem. He
Mhm.
doesn't want to write something that isn't the exact vision of what he has. And that's also a flaw. Like I also am mad that, hey man, like don't let perfect be the enemy of good sometimes. But it's like he cares so much, and you can see that in every single thing that he does. And I know this got far away from Fever Dream, but it just made me think of how impressive it is that he made me care about the boat, because I just would have thought I didn't. So
No, I think that's great. And I also just went back real quick at 1970s. Like some of the stories that we didn't think were amazing, but they had amazing atmosphere was like the Lonely Songs of Lauren Dore or Bitter
mhm.
Blooms or the Tower of Ashes. All of those were stories that maybe weren't like plot wise didn't blow us away, but the vibes were
Yeah, those
impactful.
ones were like atmosphere ones for sure. I especially really liked the Tower of Ashes. I thought was really good. And then the other thing about Fever Dream is just with the vampires. It is a vampire novel. There are classic vampire things in it, but one thing that George always does, and we see this with Ice Dragon, is he takes a thing and he changes it to be his. And I have not read super widely in vampire literature, so like I don't know if anybody else, but I feel like George's take on vampires was very interesting and new. And he builds out this whole culture and he changes it and he leaves some things the same. And I mean, he did the same thing with like werewolves. There's like the skin trade, and there's
Mhm.
one with skin changers, and obviously the ice dragon, like we mentioned. I think he takes these tropes or these like creatures or these concepts that we've had, and he changes them to make them his. And I think that's really interesting. There's also like one story, and I think it was like my least favorite story actually was the one that's like kind of King Arthur-y, and he takes like some stuff from that, and I thought that story was all just names, and you really liked it, and
I
but
did. Wasn't
it
that
still
Bitter Blooms?
I don't think it was Bitter Blooms. I don't remember which one it is because I thought it was
Okay.
made. But my point is that like he's taking mythology and like doing something interesting with it. So that's kind of always something that's cool about his works.
And I think ultimately that's what makes Song of Ice and Fire so great too, because he does that same thing there. Like when you think of how often fantasy is in this medieval time, and people have been really trying to go away from that. You read his novel and it's like, yeah, but he did it differently, and it still feels fresh when you're reading it 20 years after it was written. That's how someone's a visionary. Um, so that was the second full-length novel. No, his third, right? His third.
Yeah.
Because his fourth, which was the next year he released, was the Armageddon Rag. And I was trying to decide if I should read the quote by him to explain how the Armageddon Rag was received.
Yeah, go ahead.
Which was not well. I'll read the quote, but the Armageddon Rag is really what sent him to Hollywood. That's because his career, which was like taking off, everyone, he was saying like they were, after Fever Dream success, they were chomping at the bit for Armageddon Rag, and then it just like did nothing. So he said, it was the Armageddon Rag that sent me off to the Twilight Zone. Published by Poseidon Press in 1983, the rag was supposed to be the breakout novel that would transform me into a best-selling author. I was proud of the book, and my agent and my editor were high on it as well. Poseidon paid me a whopping big advance for the rights, and I went right out and bought a larger house. The rag received some wonderful reviews. I was nominated for the World Fantasy Award. It had all the hallmarks of a big bestseller, save one. No one bought it. Far from building on the success of Fever Dream, it sold badly in hardcover and miserably in paperback. The full extent of the disaster was not brought home to me until 1985, when Kirby tried to sell my unfinished fifth novel and found that neither Poseidon nor any other publisher was willing to make an offer. My career was in serious trouble just then. The readers had ignored the Armageddon Rag in droves, and as a result, no editor would touch black and white and red all over.
First of all, just as an aside, it's interesting. Like, I wish we had gotten that novel too. Like, I wonder how far into it he was. Like as far as I know, he's never talked about it again. Like further on in his career, so he probably never. Like, I know authors sometimes talk about things like going cold. So I imagine that novel went cold. But it's super interesting. Like, was it almost done? Like, do we have an almost complete George R. R. Martin novel?
And what was it? Sci-fi, fantasy, horror? Like,
maybe it's just a book about patriotism. Like, you know.
That sounds like George.
Editing Bookborn here. Just coming in to say that Kyle actually found an interview with Martin in 2000 that describes black and white and red all over to be a mainstream historical/horror novel set during the height of yellow journalism in the late 19th century. So I think that's really all we know about it.
So the Armageddon Rag, did either of us buck trends? Because actually, you had told me, we should say this, you had told me beforehand, like you already knew that about Armageddon Rag. I didn't. You gave me that context. You're like, this is the thing that he says like almost killed his career and why he went to Hollywood.
And this is the one that I thought you would not like. Like, I was like, oh no. And then before I read it, like I just guessed.
I remember telling you like, no one understands these things like I do. Like, I understand you, George. I'm going to like it.
You do have pick me energy. Like,
totally. Obviously about that. And then I read it and it was like terrible. I absolutely hated it. I gave it 2 stars.
First of all, you can't get something 2 stars and say it's terrible. You absolutely hated it, especially when in this video, we're going to talk about something you actually did hate and did give less stars to. So
no. We're not going to talk about that.
We're going to revision here. No, we have to. And we're not going to, I am not going to sit here and let you slander Armageddon Rag when we are later on going to slander something that fully deserves the slander.
I did hate Armageddon Rag. I gave it 2 stars because there were some interesting themes. I am consistent. I hated so much about it, but there were interesting themes. And so I bumped it up to 2 stars. And yes, after I read this other book, I thought it made Armageddon Rag look amazing. But it doesn't matter what another book, I read it and it wasn't good, Kyle.
Okay, I agree you didn't like it. I just like you're there's new depths to plummet later.
It wasn't good.
I liked it. Much more than you. And actually, no,
you liked it more than me, but you didn't.
I gave it a 3.5. You remember this? You almost lost your whole mind when I told you I was giving it a 3.5.
It was almost friendship ending. Yeah, I remember.
You didn't talk to me for like 6 weeks. So actually, what's interesting to me about Armageddon Rag is how much I was not enjoying the book for the most part, but I found it super interesting to read, and we're going to talk about why. But when you finished it, I just thought it was so funny because you finished it before me, like quite a bit before me, because I was having trouble getting past like the first like 100 pages was just not really speaking to me. And you finished it and you were just like, this is not like George at all. I don't understand. Like, I can't see anything in any, like, this is not, and it's because you were just like on the idea that like, you really like characters and like, you were just like, I'm out. Like, I just hate everybody in this book. Therefore it can't be George. And the whole time I was reading it, I was like, this is literally the most George R. R. Martin thing I've ever read besides The Song of Ice and Fire. Like, it is so George R. R. Martin. It is so A Song of Ice and Fire coded, just the whole book, everything about it. Pretty much.
You should say some of the things because actually I remember you telling them and I was like grudgingly like, okay.
Well, no, because backstory, Bookborn has never like changed her mind about anything I've ever said. She's like, here's what I think, and I'll tell her, and she'll be like, no, I'm standing by what I said. But this time she was like, I was like, actually, I think this is a lot like A Song of Ice and Fire and George. And you're like, what do you mean? And I sent her a big laundry list of stuff. She's like, facts. Okay. That do be true.
You did, yeah.
So with Armageddon Rag, I think it's a mess. It's a lot of very ambitious ideas that don't fully mesh together to me. Like I can see why it kind of failed. It is a very strange book. It deals a lot with music, and I really like music, so I think that's why I liked it more than you, because I really like the stuff with music the most. I think that's what worked the most for me. And it's also a murder mystery. So, and
you know how you tell me that like I have mom eyes, like mom blinders? You have music blinders.
Absolutely, for sure.
Not an excuse.
I will totally accept that. These are our blinders, and it's what we live with.
Okay,
so yeah, so the book starts with a murder mystery. Like there's like this journalist who, by the way, I mean, it is interesting that he was a journalist right before this. So this is kind of like that tie-in.
And I should actually say that the first 100 pages are what I like the most, or the first 50 pages. Like I vibed with the beginning, if you remember.
Yeah, I remember. And I thought it was fine. And so there's this band, the Nazgul, which great name. And they broke up.
I want a Nazgul band t-shirt.
Yeah, it would be good. Although everybody would think you would be talking about Lord of the Rings. It would be exhausting.
Well, no. It wouldn't be exhausting because that's fine. They can think it's Lord of the Rings.
That's true.
I like Lord of the Rings.
That's true.
They can think that.
Yeah, the deep cuts, the one person you meet in your entire life that's read Armageddon Rag, they'll be like,
yeah,
hey.
Exactly. You would get it. John would get it. It's fine.
Yeah. And so this band broke up because their singer was killed on stage. And in like the 60s, it was kind of like a Woodstocky type event, although it wasn't Woodstock, but it was like a clear analogous to that. And then the band broke up, and now somebody's going around murdering the members of the band. And so there's a murder mystery of what's going on here. And I found so many of the themes and actual just like even symmetry and imagery about what's going on in this book to be prototypes for Song of Ice and Fire. First of all, George is a hippie, and he's an old hippie. And the book is so mired in like 60s nostalgia, which I found grating, and I think is also what you really didn't like about the book, right? But I found it really interesting because in this book, people are thinking the end of like the 60s is actually when this guy got shot and that band ended. Like it's like that signaled the end of this like time of love and harmony, and there's people trying to like enact dark magic to kind of bring some of that stuff back. And just this like wistfulness for the past is so in A Song of Ice and Fire. You see it in so many characters, even like that speech that Catelyn makes about the boys of summer and how they're the idealistic, but their dreams haven't been shattered. We kind of see the other side of that in Armageddon Rag, where it's like these hippies are now like hitting middle age, and they were all fighting for like peace, and like, they're protesting Vietnam and all this stuff, and now they're like they have jobs and they have stuff to do, and their lives didn't go the way they wanted, and they're thinking back to those times where they did have that youthful energy, that spunk, that go get them. They wanted to change the world. And so it's kind of seeing the reverse side of that. There's so many things about like, with Ned and all these other characters, Barristan, thinking about before the rebellion or during the rebellion, their glory days and what was going on with that, that I think is really echoed there. Obviously the murder mystery. I mean, Game of Thrones starts with Jon Arryn getting murdered. So you have that right away. There's a lot of like fire and ice imagery and symbolism in the book. And there's also people being resurrected, or just like people being made to pretend to be another person, which George loves himself a fake identity. And I think this is the first time he really played around with it. And then there's like some other things that are like spoilery. I just thought the book was so much like exploring what he would later explore with The Song of Ice and Fire, but set in America, which I found that aspect really interesting. And the end of the book is very
not George.
No, that's not true at all. It's
Zach Green. That's why I didn't like it.
Bookborn. I need you to get all the way off my back about this because you're wrong.
Okay.
I'll
be quiet till you're done.
No, I'm just kidding. But I think the ending of it is very like nostalgic and wistful, and also like hopeful of how much music is powerful and how music is timeless and how it changes people, and how no matter what is going on in your life, music is always there for you. And like it's this unchanging cultural thing that has formed you and formed a culture and formed a time. And I really, really love the ending. It like put it up for me. And you don't like music because, you don't like fun and joy and happiness.
Your blinders.
So I totally admit these are my blinders. I was just like, oh yeah, the ending totally worked for me. And I don't think it was saccharine because it also was not Actually, other parts of the ending were saccharine. The part that I really liked, I don't think was saccharine.
Okay.
But anyway,
because it was like the very ending to me that I was just like, why is this all like tied with a pretty little bow? It just
that part was dumb. I don't care about that at all. I'm talking about the stuff on the stage.
Oh no, the stuff that happened on the stage, I actually liked that part. Thank you very much.
That part made me emotional. Like I was like, it was so good.
It's kind of funny. I had a problem with all the nostalgia. I felt like it was just heaps of nostalgia in a way that did not work for me, in a way that felt very like the nostalgia bait that's coming out right now for all the millennials, where I'm just like, why are we doing this?
But okay, so, and I say this as somebody who loves some of that nostalgia stuff. Like if you take like Stranger Things is like the big.
No, not Stranger. I'm talking about the we're just going to do a sequel to everything because you used to like it. I'm talking about the bad stuff. No, I love stuff that calls back. I think Stranger Things fan.
I think okay. I have to do a temperature check here. What do you feel about like the '60s stuff in general?
Like in the novel?
Stuff. No, just in life. Like if you just think of like hippies and like Woodstock, like Summer of Love, like Peace and Love, like just tie dye. How do you feel about that stuff?
How do you feel about any era?
I don't know. I'm asking you personally. How do you feel about that stuff?
I'm just saying you could interchange it with any era, and I'd be like neutral.
Okay,
the 70s, the 50s, the 40s, neutral.
Because I really don't see that in the book. That's interesting. Like I think it's grating how much they go on and on about it, like to read about. But I don't think it's nostalgia bait at all. I think he's making a very distinct, and like the whole point of the book is that these people have been displaced and they are stuck in their nostalgia.
So when
and
you describe it, when you were just describing it, by the way, I'm like, wow, you're describing a book that sounds amazing. And that's
literally in the book so much. There's so many. No. I think you were in your feelings about it because like it is objectively, well, not objectively. To us, we both agreed the monologues they were making about the 60s are very annoying. But in those monologues, it would be somebody being like, yeah, man, the 60s were great. And like, oh my God, like, we were all just like free and happy and kind, and like the summer of love. And that's like really annoying. But then like another person would be like, yeah, and now my life is terrible and things are bad. And then they'd be like, what did we all do? We didn't accomplish anything. And then Sandy will be like, yeah, we didn't accomplish anything, but we should still fight for that's the themes right there, is that like they're stuck in their nostalgia. But
it wasn't written well.
Well, that's fine. But I'm just saying the theme is there, and you always give things more for themes, and I think that you're missing this theme.
That's why I got it too.
I know. Anyway, I think we've talked about Armageddon rag enough, but I think that's the one that we like had the biggest gap in our view on it. So,
what I think is interesting is, so then we have all the tough stuff, which I loved Tough Voyaging. I think you really enjoyed it too. I might have enjoyed it more than you.
No, that's not true.
That's not true. Jake, I enjoyed it more than Jake. That's where I was crossing wires. Tough, which came out first as a short stories individually, and then it got all put together. But you can see the effect of the Armageddon rag not being successful, because although we have these short stories, you start seeing a lot of the TV coming up in his career. I think I had written down, like, he got his first Emmy Award nomination in 1988 for his work on Beauty and the Beast. I mean, it wasn't for him personally, but like he was a part of the Beauty and the Beast Emmy. And then there was an 8-year gap between him getting nominated for awards, between Wild Cards in 1989 and then a short story in 1997. So I feel like
didn't he get nominated for Game of Thrones? I mean, that would have been 97. But Game of Thrones,
it was Blood of the Dragon in 97 was the first thing. So it was like he didn't get.
There's no way that Game of Thrones didn't get nominated for something. There's just literally no way.
So the 8-year gap is between Wild Cards 4 in 1989 for The Locust to a Game of Thrones in 1996.
Yeah, I mean, I think that he like pretty much abandoned his career just to pay the bills, and like nobody's high. He said like he couldn't get in advance. And I know there's like a couple short stories and stuff like that, but even like when Tough came out as a hey, I could put this together with a couple more stories. Like I think his publisher or his agent came to him and was like, we could do this as a book if you kind of add a little bit more. So, and then he did the skin trade and stuff near the end of the end of the decade. So there was a little bit more, but he had largely stopped writing books during that time.
Yeah, it was just like short stories. And
what he was doing was becoming really good friends with Roy Dotrice, which is my just worst part of his career, because then Roy narrated the A Song of Ice and Fire books.
You're not a fan.
I just can't stand them. I just truly can't. Rest in peace, Roy. You were a great actor and just not a good audiobook narrator.
And then before we wrap up the 1980s, he was also doing wild cards at that time. But the bulk of his writing was likely in the 80s because I think he got less involved in the 90s. I know he was involved, but less stories as the time went on, as far as I know.
I don't think we talked about Tough a lot. Like, do you want to talk about Tough more? We talked about Armageddon Ran for like 25 minutes.
That's true. We should talk about Tough because we both actually really liked Tough.
Yeah.
What I think Tough is something that is indicative of his career for me is that's a collection of short stories, but like there's, I think, was it 3 or 4 of them that are touch points at the same location?
There's 3. Yeah.
There's 3. And when I first read Tough Voyaging, like the first novella, I was like, this is fine, or short story, fine. And then like each story, I was like, I like that more and more and more and more. And then by the end, I really loved it. And I do think he's very good at building on top of ideas. So like, that was, he always is talking about his like 1,000 world stories and how he wants all these stories to interconnect. And that's a really great one of having, a character going to a lot of different places and then doing a through line. And also a character who you're on their side for a lot of it. And then by the end, you're not so sure maybe you should be. And I think he's very, very good at writing that sort of character in a lot of different ways of like making characters that make questionable decisions, like to disarm you or changing your opinion about them halfway through. Like that's all over A Song of Ice and Fire. And Tough reminds me of that.
Tough reminds me of that too. And also, like, I just think the character in general is a blueprint for Tyrion. Very, very Tyrion energy. I think in general, like up to this point, I'm trying to think of a character that he had written that was more distinct. And I think Tough is his first, like, really, really great. Well, okay. I think Abner Marsh is also very distinct. And Josh, yeah, very great. And I'm not saying like best character. I'm just talking about in terms of like character voice and like distinction. But I would say, okay, Fever Dream has very distinct 2 main characters. But apart from them, like, it's really more like he might write a really good character, but it's not like this like outlandish or like very memorable character. And I think Tough, and he talks about Tough a lot. Like he wanted to do more Tough stuff. I think this is the character that he gets a lot of people wanting more from, besides A Song of Ice and Fire, obviously. And they just relatively recently started doing like graphic novels of these short stories. So he's been talking about it a little bit more in the last couple of years, and it really does sound like something that he had wanted to return to, and he had like ideas for sequels to it and stuff. And yeah, like the character of Tough is just so singular and very fun and witty and intelligent, and he relies on his intelligence. Like, people underestimate him, and he has to use his ingenuity to get out of situations and to like get a one-up.
Well, they underestimate him often because of how he looks. So you're right. That's like a huge Tyrion connection.
And also he's just this like one man alone with his cats, like, versus like a nation, right? And as an aside, I think it's just interesting. Like we have a good friend, Jake Bishop, who read it at the same time as us, and he liked it probably around the same amount as you, like maybe a little less, but the exact opposite, where he thought the beginning was really strong, and then like as it went along, he didn't like it, and I just thought that was funny. There's like literally the exact opposite reasons. But also the people in the stories, the like continuous stories, are the dumbest people ever written, for sure. Like that's my main criticism of the series, is that like the people that just want to reproduce forever and ever and ever and ever. And he's like, hey guys, have you ever thought of a condom? And they're like, this is infringing on our rights. We're going to have billions of us. And they're dumb.
Yeah, I know. But okay, I understand what you're saying. I thought you were saying like the character he interacts with a lot in that world is really dumb, and I kind of thought he was a great character. But now I understand what you're saying.
No, yeah, the people, literally the world, like the world building of those worlds is like his weakest. Doesn't make any sense.
But. I don't know, but see, here's the thing, Kyle. Now I'm going to defend this because you got to defend Armageddon Rag for like 25 minutes. This is the thing. Like, he's going to these worlds and they're representing ideas. Like the stories about Tough and the extremity of how he would solve these problems. Everyone on every planet's kind of dumb, but it didn't hurt me because it wasn't a full novel.
Like, okay, there's the one story where it's like the Sea World, which kind of reminds me of Windhaven, and they're like, those people are like dumb regular, and I think it's because we went to the same planet 3 times, because like the first time they're dumb regular, and then the second time they're like dumb premium, and then the third time they're like dumb premium plus. Like, I'm like, these are the dumbest. Like, it goes to the guys
make my pessimism come out, because I do feel like I'm kind of a glass half full person.
I don't think,
but like, what did you say? No, I'm not.
No, I mean, I agree that you are, but I was kidding.
because Jimmy from Chatting with Nuts does this to me sometimes too, and I'm like, am I actually not? Because I think in that world, the idea that a religious ideology has overtaken any sense feels too realistic to me. Like this is how it's
I
been done. This is
I
the
I know
extremity
what
of a
you're
religious
saying.
thing, and like that to me, it was like, yeah, they have all sense has been lost, and these people who are trying to fix it, there's no way to do it because they just want to stay in the popular.
I think my problem with it, now that you're saying that, is that I think not being shown any of it is my problem. And the story didn't have time to show it. Like I understand. But we really only have like two representatives of this world. And also people watching this feel like, guys, you're talking about one part of one book, but I don't care. We're talking about it. But like for me, for that to make sense, I feel like we needed to see these people and see these factions. And like the story didn't have time for it. Like I understand. But
Yeah.
you can make me buy pretty much anything. Like I was telling you about, seeing 28 years later
Yes,
yesterday, and I
you
was
were
explaining some stuff in that movie,
right.
and you're like, that sounds like the dumbest movie of all time. I'm like, hey, when it's set up, it's like it's a good movie. So it's like you can make me convinced of anything, but it's just being like, yeah, actually, all of these people would rather all die than just like, you know, maybe think about conservation like 1%. Like it just was dumb. But I get what you're saying. Like I could see it. It needed more justification
More
for
cook
it.
time. We should move on, but I do think we should briefly talk about the pear-shaped man and the skin trade. Oh, no, no.
Well, we
I
should
was
talk
thinking
about
the
Portraits of
pear-shaped.
His Children, which is your favorite.
Oh, did we miss that? Oh,
Yes.
we need to talk about portraits of his children. Can't believe we haven't
Yes.
talked about that.
Yeah. Well, that's the same time as Tuft. Like,
It's the same time as Tough. Okay.
yeah.
Portraits of His Children came out in 1985. And the thing about Portraits of His Children is it's actually the last thing Kyle and I read for the year of George R. R. Martin because it's the last story in Dream Songs Volume 2. And we saved Dream Songs for December. So the irony to me that, like, I think we had talked about this. For me, I got to that and I was like, okay, there is something like I super enjoyed this. I know you just like we loved so much
Yeah.
of this
I thought
stuff.
that one was great. It's like one of his best stories
You're
to me.
getting to the end. No, I'm just saying it's like the whole project.
Oh, yeah, yeah, for
like,
sure. Okay.
You're getting to the end and you're like, man, I just have one more story. And I just thought, I'm just gonna get it done. And like I had never heard of Portraits of His Children. No one was talking about it. I know that I'm not like in the know.
Yeah, it's like he has a short story collection for it, which I tracked down a signed version of it. So I'm excited to like read the couple stories in it.
I really want to get one of them. Not
yeah.
signed, but.
So I knew that it had to have been a pop because if it was like a named collection, it had to have been good. But I just like, I don't hear that many people talk about it. I had never heard George talk about it until like last week, which was funny.
No, that was funny. You like sent me.
Yeah,
like,
he mentioned it like leading up to because somebody asked him about like the adaptations because A Night of Seven Kingdoms came out, and he was like, well, I wrote this story. And it was called Portraits of the Children. And it's how like this writer, he's like really miserable, and all of his children really are his stories and like how they've lived with him. And I don't have any kids, and so my stories are my kids. And it was like I was like, oh, he's finally mentioning this again. And but yeah, sorry, I cut you off. Basically, what we were saying is we loved.
I've heard of Sand Kings, So Portrait of His Children just took me totally like by surprise. I think it did for both of us, just like out of nowhere. This incredible thoughtful story. And what was so interesting is Portraits of His Children, there's a lot there, but the one thing I wanted to highlight in terms of this conversation in A Song of Ice and Fire is that story directly deals with the representation of sexual assault in stories and like what the responsibility of a writer, like I'm simplifying it, but I don't know how to say it without like spoiling. Like the responsibility of a writer and a reader when it comes to those topics. And like, that's been something I've talked about the whole time I've been reading A Song of Ice and Fire. So to see like in 1985, like, a decade before he wrote A Song of Ice and Fire, that he was thinking about that stuff and wrote this amazing story about it, like really blew my mind, quite frankly.
Yeah, I do think it like put some of his, more shocking or like titillating stuff in A Song of Ice and Fire in different contexts. And I mean, I've always been, when I say a defender of it, I don't mean a defender of it, but like in terms of like, I felt like it's included with more intentionality. And then the show like just was like, what? Like we should just do lots of sexual assault stuff. And it's like, what if we didn't? And like George also was like, this was changed. So I do think George has always been very intentional about it. And I think that this story is kind of like him grappling with it in a more like literal way. Like there's two characters in it that talk about a sexual assault that happened and how that impacted both of them in like a really poignant way. And I don't think we should say what it was, but like it was like really well done that I thought. And so, yeah.
I gave 5 stars. It was super well done. And it's not like it changed because like obviously I'm obsessed with the Song of Ice and Fire. This is why we're here. But I had some criticisms for some of the stuff. And it is interesting because it doesn't like necessarily retroactively change a couple of things I had problems with, but it does make me think like he was at least thinking about it when he was doing it, if he was thinking about it a full decade before. And not that I thought they weren't purposeful. I mean, we had talked about like, yeah, the stuff in there is purposeful, which is why I can read the series and enjoy it because it is. But it changed. It was the last thing I read and it totally like altered a little bit.
Ended on a high note.
It ended on a high note.
Just what you said kind of made me have a thought of just like, you know, a lot of people like lose nuance when they talk about things, or it's like they think because they love something they can't see. I mean, you've talked about this a lot on your channel. Like you love A Song of Ice and Fire, and like your first video was like, I didn't love the way Danny was talking about it. And like you've always kept up with like, you know, parts that you thought. And I just like, obviously there's lots of people who can hold two ideas in their head, but I do think we're losing that a lot. And so like I love the series, you love the series. I think most of the assault stuff or like stuff around sexuality is intentional, and he's making points with it. But that being said, I also think the way he talks about Danny is disgusting. Like a lot of the times, like there's just because I think it was intentional and I generally like the series doesn't mean that I can't think I'm like, we could just, you know, you could have done a Passover on this and like change some words. You know what I mean? Like you can criticize something you love is all I'm saying. And I know that you've always been good at that. But I'm just saying that in general, like it is healthy to criticize things you love because that's how A, you get better as a reader and a thinker, and B, it's how people are able to interact with ideas better. So.
No, I think it's always important to say, like, I know you weren't explaining that to me. Yeah. I think like increasingly you just see the loss of all nuance to discussions when we talk about these things because people just want there to be a black and white bucket where it's like, you can put it good, bad. And the other thing I always told people is like, lying about it doesn't help. And I said that in that first video. I was like, you didn't come out and be like, there's nothing you're going to find a problem with in A Song of Ice and Fire. What you said is it's not as bad as you think. And the problems you have of it will be vastly outweighed by how much you like.
I think a lot of people try to minimize, they try to minimize the aspects of the thing that they think will be problematic because they think once the person's already in it, they'll go over it. And to a degree that can be true, to a small degree, but I'm like, I don't want to try to get you to read something. And then you start reading it and you're like, no, I was right. This makes me super uncomfortable. And how dare Kyle do this? So it's like, there's that aspect of just being like, it is okay to think this is too much, but just maybe
for sure. But it's also just like going in front with it in honesty. You're going to get people to go further than if you trick them into doing it. And then they feel like everything they thought was confirmed.
They've been tricked. Yeah. This is how to convince your friends to read A Song of Ice and Fire 101, folks. Be honest.
Yes. Be honest. Be honest with it. I mean, I always laugh, but like I get messages weekly that video convinced people to read A Song of Ice and Fire. And it's because they saw someone not being like just being straight about it.
I won't say the name unless you say the name, but like we were at Worldcon and somebody that like people would know walked up to Bookborn and was like, you got me to read A Song of Ice and Fire. And I was like, there we go. I'm taking 25% of this credit. That's
You need to take.
I'm like the Shark Tank of this enterprise, where it's like I will convince you to read A Song of Ice and Fire, but I get 25% of the credit for everybody else. So
yes. I posted that on Instagram, so I don't think he minds. That was
Man Carrying Thing.
That was Jake from Man Carrying Thing who said that. I was very complimented by that. But before we move on from the 1980s, so that was amazing. But I did want to quickly talk about the monkey treatment and the pear-shaped man, because I think those are the two where you're like, oh, Bookborn just does not do body horror, and we have confirmed it.
Okay, so the pear-shaped man, I will say, I was trying to get through this a little fast. We were in a bit of a crunch time. Originally, we were going to film this video like end of December, early January. So like I think we were both kind of trying to get it done, even though we were liking it. And this is one of the only ones I listened to on audio with the pear-shaped man, and it was done by my least favorite audiobook narrator, Roy Dotrice. So sorry, buddy. And that was just horrible. And I'm just so sorry that I just do not like his narration, literally 1%. And so that was not good. I have to reread it at some point, but it's also a very deeply uncomfortable story. So it might be a little bit.
That surprised me is people were the most surprised that I didn't like that one. They're like, that one's so good. And I was like, no, I can't.
That one's very creepy. I think the thing is that you are very good at understanding why something exists and then still just being like, I don't care. Like, I don't like it. Like, you know, A Night of Seven Kingdoms premiered like last week, and there's a poop scene right at the very beginning. And lots of people have been talking about this. And right off, you were like, I hated that scene. And I was like, well, yeah, here's why I think it existed. And you're like, well, no, I understood that. I just hated it. I'm like, that's fair. Like, that's, and all is to say that I think you read the story and understood that like it's supposed to be creepy and unsettling, but you're like, I was unsettled, so no.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. Like, and well, that one for sure, I was like, I should like the paratreatment more, but I just hate it. I hated reading it, but like, I think it's a good story. Like, there's a difference between like hating something and thinking it's bad, which is, I don't think so. And then the monkey treatment, though.
I love the monkey treatment. That one's so good. That one's absurd in the best way. I love that one. That one is so good. Like, I think actually that's probably our biggest gap in the stories.
You just kind of need to go read it. You got to know.
It's nuts.
And then just ending the skin trade. I had some problems with the skin trade in ways that I sometimes just have problems with George R. R. Martin's writing, but I thought the skin trade was very good, like as a story. And that was the different take on werewolves that I just thought was so great.
That's one of the many ones that I wish like had like a sequel, like not even necessarily directly, but like another one in that world kind of deal. I really liked that novella. And he did a bind up with Dan Simmons, Stephen King. I think it was just the three of them of like different short stories or like novellas that they did in horror. And that was the one included for that. And then I can't remember what was included for Stephen King, but I want to track that down just to have like one from all three of them, which is cool.
Yeah, especially because you're such a huge Stephen King fan.
Yeah.
So then we move into the 90s and the 2000s, which I have combined together because I've called it the A Song of Ice and Fire era. Because what's really interesting is once we move into A Song of Ice and Fire, we're not really leaving it. And that's something I wanted to talk about because we have seen his past career and how varied it is and how he's always doing different projects. And even if they get bind ups, it's all this different stuff. And then we get a Game of Thrones in 1996. And to be clear, the skin trade was 1988. So, I mean, it's been a long time. The Armageddon Rag was 1983. So his last full novel that wasn't just like a bind up was 83. So that was 13 years prior. We get a Game of Thrones, and then that's it. We are Games of Throning pretty much exclusively through the 90s and 2000s, which I just think is a very interesting turn in his career when you look at the other decades.
Well, it's because he'd never written any fantasy. So, he wrote fantasy. He was like, "This is a brand new thing to me." Yeah, I know. I saw the look on your face. It was actually really good. I almost kept going, but I was like, if I just leave this beat, and it was great. I'm glad I did.
It took me a second.
Before we get into A Song of Ice and Fire, we should skip ahead a little because I feel like then we can just end on the positives of how great A Song of Ice and Fire is, which is he did technically kind of sort of a little bit release a novel with Gardner Dozier and Daniel Abraham called Hunter's Run in 2007. Would you like to talk about that book, Lauren?
No, because it's the worst thing I've ever read. 1 star. I hate it so much. In fact, actually, until I said it now, does it actually finally displace my least favorite book that has been my least favorite book for like 8 or 9 years?
Oh my God, that's hot off the press. I know what book you're talking about, The Circle?
The Circle by Dave Eggers.
Yeah.
Is Hunter's Run worse than The Circle by Dave Eggers?
You heard it here first, folks. This is an exclusive. George R. R. Martin, one of her favorite books of all time, several of her favorite books of all time, and her least favorite. Dichotomies.
No. It's fine because George did not do any of this. I sleep at night. George had a couple ideas in this novel, and there's like a blog post to back us up. I'm not blaming him for any of this.
I think it's Gardner. So for context for this, because this is like a very weird history, and I feel like most people won't know it because a lot of people don't even know Hunter's Run exists. So Hunter's Run.
I wish I didn't know Hunter's Run existed.
Hunter's Run is a bind-up novel that took almost 30 years, like 25 years to be released in the form that it is currently released in. And the premise is Gardner Dozier had a idea for a story, and he wrote like a couple pages of it, and he read it. I think it was in the late 70s, early 80s. And then George was like, that's a really good idea. And Gardner didn't have good ideas to continue it. So he gave it to George. George wrote, we don't know exactly how much, but up until like it said the first chase sequence, which is relatively early in the book. And then he put it in a drawer for a really long time and it went cold. He didn't know what to do with it. And then he gave it back to Gardner, and then Gardner didn't have ideas. So it sat in a drawer for a really long time. And then they gave it to up and coming author Daniel Abraham that Bookborn has not read, but I've read quite a lot of Daniel Abraham, and I do really like him. I think he's a great author. And he released the novella Shadow Twins. And then that was out in the world. And then Gardner Dozier took Shadow Twins and took their original stuff and then added more and re-edited it all together into a novel. So I do think most of the book is Gardner, and then we actually saw an interview where Gardner said that like his tone clashed with Daniel Abraham's, which makes a lot of sense because Daniel Abraham is like quite clean, and he doesn't do any like graphic sexual stuff or anything. Like he's very, and this book was pretty like just crass for the sake of it a lot of the times.
And in defense, crass in a way that George isn't. Because remember, I kept telling you, like, that's not the way that George does it, though. Not him.
It also was just lacking nuance. Like the main character just thought every dumb, like just macho nothingness, just garbage crap that anybody could write. It was just very one-dimensional in all sense. And so Gardner was saying that he like went through to like make it more tonally consistent. And he also was the one that like wrote the last part of it and the beginning. I just feel like it was mostly him. We'll never know exactly. But regardless, George did not write that much of it. And I hated that book too. It was awful. We read it with our friend Alan from the Library of Alexandria, who is maybe the biggest Daniel Abraham fan that I know. And he also was like, this doesn't read like George or Daniel Abraham at all. So all three of us.
The Discord we had with the three of us was one of my funniest things because it was all of us being like, don't blame it. Because I was like, this isn't George. I'm blaming it on the other two. And you guys were like, don't blame it on Abraham. We were all like, we're just going to go completely blame it on Gardner.
I have a short story collection from Gardner, and I actually unhauled it after reading this book. Like
you
I
didn't
was
even
like,
try it to see if it was better?
Done. I'm out. No, absolutely not. I hated this book. I have no redeeming qualities for it. I literally, I gave it 1 star, and I think my review, I'm going to pull up my full review of Hunter's
Do you
Run.
remember what my review was?
Isn't it just nope?
No, it's no thanks.
Oh, okay. My review for this book, all in low caps, like I didn't even bother to use capitalization, is truly a waste of time. Like, and that's a shame.
It's a waste of time to write a review. That's why all our reviews are just like, no.
Yeah. We're having a little bit of fun with this, guys, but like we didn't like it. Like it's not good. I don't recommend reading it. And A Song of Ice and Fire though is really good.
2000s.
Yeah.
You know what was good? A Game of Thrones. Is that what you just said?
Yeah. Song of Ice and Fire. Yeah.
Cool. I just repeated your joke. That's fine. That's always a great thing to do.
Simpatico.
So I'm just going to say it just so people have the dates, because I feel like sometimes they're not there. I think it's just interesting. It's like 1996 was A Game of Thrones. 1998 was The Hedge Knight. That was just surprising for me. I had thought that first novella was written a little later.
Actually, I'm going to actually you here. And you know what? We're an hour and a half into this and I haven't actually you, so you should be proud of me.
It's appropriate. Yeah.
You did know because I told you before you read it and you just forgot.
Well, I got re-surprised. Yeah,
exactly. It's okay to get re-surprised. You just don't listen to me.
Yeah, exactly. That's why we're here, because I didn't listen to you.
Exactly.
A Game of Thrones, 1996, The Hedge Knight, 1998, A Clash of Kings in 1999, A Storm of Swords in 2000. Important Dream Songs in 2003. There's a couple of reasons I want to put this here, because I'm going to read some quotes. All these quotes, by the way, have been from A Dream Songs. So keep in mind that all those quotes were written in 2003, after A Storm of Swords. And also because Kyle and I talked about how interesting it is, like, obviously, A Storm of Swords was wildly popular. Like, obviously, like, A Song of Ice and Fire was a wildly popular series, and Storm of Swords was known for being incredible when it was released. But he didn't have the fame he had yet. There was no Game of Thrones show. It hadn't come out yet. And so the fact that they were already doing a retrospective on his career at that point, like, speaks to how important he was to the genre, even though people only associate him with A Song of Ice and Fire.
Yeah, because it's not even a short story collection. That's lots of authors have that. It is a retrospective. He's being interviewed and not interviewed, but he's doing essays about his career because he's been very impactful. And I want to say just something funny about that. It's very hard. Like, I was thinking about this while reading it. It's very hard for me to imagine. Like, when people talk about, I know Mike from Mike's Book Reviews and John from Talking Story, they liked the series before the show came out. And in my head, when they talk about this, when anybody talks about this, I'm like, oh, you like this little niche series that nobody knew about. Like, you were on the precipice, like you were on the cutting edge, like you and 9 other people knew about this book called Storm of Swords. Like, I know it won awards and all that stuff, but in my head, I can't conceptualize it, which is interesting because now I like a lot of fantasy, and there's so much fantasy that is very popular that doesn't have an adaptation. You know, there's Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere, there's the Red Rising series, there's hundreds of them, there's Malazan. And I'm like, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of fans. But in my head, I literally cannot make that bridge. Like, to me, it's like, it was just this like underground thing that like 25 people in the basement were like, hey, you heard about this guy with the Game of Thrones? And I think that's absurd. Like, I just can't do it.
Yeah, and I think the reason is, though, like, I'm going to defend you in this because, like, I know what you mean. That's ridiculous, obviously, to even get an adaptation. But I think it's because it has literally, the show made it transcend everything. Like, George R. R. Martin is, other than J.K. Rowling, like, considered the most, like, the fantasy author with the most name recognition. Assuming that most people view Stephen King as horror. Obviously, we know.
I was about to push back on that, but.
No, I said, obviously, I know that's not true, but I'm saying
I know.
In the world, but like have the most name recognition. Like people don't know fantasy authors' names. Like I can't tell you how many times, even though
J.K. Rowling
talking about him now, but like
fantasy.
he's a great example.
She just wrote a book about wizards and a magic school, and dragons, but it wasn't fantasy.
What?
Did you not know that Rowling, like for years, said that she didn't write fantasy? That's like a real thing.
Yeah. No, we don't need to talk about that. I don't even want to talk about her. So you know other authors I don't like to talk about, but Neil Gaiman, like people never hear that name. Like I would be like, oh, I'm reading this book by Neil Gaiman, and they're like, who in the heck is that? And I'm like, oh, do you know Coraline? They're like, Coraline? I love Coraline. Like it doesn't matter how popular something is, to get your name recognized as a fantasy author.
I will push back on that slightly. Neil Gaiman was in multiple episodes of The Simpsons playing himself. Like Neil Gaiman was well known. Like, but I know what you're saying.
I didn't think he wasn't well known. I'm saying he did not have household recognition.
You can't play yourself in The Simpsons without people expecting them to know who he is.
He didn't have. He's not a household name. I'm just telling you.
George is higher.
Everybody knows who you are, even the podunk person. Okay, can I tell you something, Kyle? You know how many, if I watched The Simpsons, how many people do you think I'd recognize who played themselves? I know nothing. You have to think about me as an individual.
Okay. All right. You know what? You've convinced me there. You do know nothing.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So anyway, that's going to be important because I'm about to read you a quote in a little bit, and you guys are going to be like, what the heck is this quote? And I'm like, remember, Dream Songs was in 2003. So Dream Songs 2003. Then we have The Sworn Sword, which is another Night of the Seven Kingdoms in 2003, and A Feast for Crows also comes out. A Feast for Crows comes out in 2005. The last novella that we have of Knights of the Seven Kingdom in 2010, and then the first season of A Game of Thrones in 2011. And that was also the same year that A Dance with Dragons came out, which is important because then you know the other Game of Thrones seasons came out after that, and the bind-ups and stuff. But I think that's really important to see, like, in terms of when his popularity exploded and how that was happening. I think is just very interesting in the context of how famous he is now. And how disproportional it is for his career. I don't know if I'm explaining that right, but it's like he wrote all of this stuff, and then to see in like the 2 decades, it just be A Song of Ice and Fire, and that's when he explodes, and that's the only thing he's known for. And it just feels, well, that's right now the end of his career. Like that's where we are right now, is just weird. Do you get what I'm saying?
I do, and I'm going to out myself a little here. We were supposed to film this last week. And the day that we were supposed to film this was the day this giant interview came out that everybody's been talking about, in which George just says a lot of things that upset me. And, you know, I've been a fan for a long time, and I've always had a little bit of hope. Not that we'd get the end of the series, because like just math, we're not getting the end of the series. I'm sorry. And I'm not even saying that to be a pessimist. It's just like, I just don't see it. But I did think we were going to get wins, and I still hope that we're going to get wins. But that article was a struggle for me. It really hit me in my feelings. And I was like, I think I need some time to digest the fact that he said a lot of things in there that just really, really broke my hope. But the reason I'm bringing it up is not to be a downer, except to say that in that interview, he's talking about, like, he gets asked and he's like, yeah, you know, I sat down with Frank Herbert, and Frank Herbert, you know, was sick of writing Dune, and he wanted to write all these other things, and they would not give him like much of an advance, and he just was tired of it. And then the interviewer is like, are you sick of it? And he's like, I'm not sick of the world, but yeah, I kind of relate. And I just think that's a very depressing thing. And I want to say, as somebody who, like, George has changed my life more than pretty much anybody that, like, I don't know personally. His work is incredibly meaningful to me. And I met him this year at Worldcon, and I got to tell him that, and he was very kind. And we met him a couple other times briefly. That I just see an overwhelming sense of sadness that after reading all these books and short stories and all these things that he wants to return to, or like different things he wants to play with, that he feels stuck in A Song of Ice and Fire. And I know that there's going to be people that say, he can write whatever he wants and it's his fault. Blah, blah, blah. Just, take your breath off the keyboard for just a second and just think about the humanity of being a person that feels like the weight of expectations is on you, and you feel like you have to write this thing, and you do want to write it, but it's this expectation thing, and you want to do something else, and you just don't feel like that you have the time to do it. And that's just like a really hard thing. Like just being a human being, just being a person, that feels very hard. And it makes me very sad, as much as I love A Song of Ice and Fire, seeing all this incredible stuff that he wants or could return to, or writing brand new stuff, and that he feels, justifiably or not, he feels like he is probably stuck doing this. And maybe if he had, it's been 15 years, maybe if he had taken a couple years early on, like he finished Dance with Dragon, he pulled a Brandon Sanderson and just was like, instead of working on Winds of Winter, I'm taking 3 years to do a detour. I'm doing Tough Voyaging 2 or whatever it is he wanted to do. Maybe he would have came back and then revitalized, but we'll never know. But maybe he would have some other stuff that was really good. Maybe he would feel like he was in a better place. We don't know. But this is a very long monologue to just say that I love A Song of Ice and Fire, and I love that we have it, and I want wins, but I wish that this man had felt like he had the freedom to write more things that he just like genuinely wanted to write in the moment.
Yeah, and that's like my exact rant I gave at the end of my ranking video. So people want me to say the same thing, but in my voice. That is literally the end of my ranking video of George R. R. Martin. Just like, and people took it well and badly, just as you would expect, because I think
lots of people are mad. Like the thing is I understand the anger. I think we forget he's a person. And I think meeting him and seeing him as like, I never forgot he was a person, but like literally just like interacting with him and just seeing him be like nice and like talk about like, this like little short film and being like, and he asked me about my Song of Ice and Fire tattoo, like just little like human things. It's like, this is just a man that just wants to be around and do stuff. And I just think people lose sight of that.
Yeah. And like, I always say it's hard for me to come to these conversations because I went in and I had made my piece before I even started a Game of Thrones that it wouldn't be finished. Like, that's how I had to judge. Like, people like, oh, so you've lost hope. It's not that. It's like, I had to be, is it okay? Mm-hmm. And so I went in already knowing that. And so like, for me, I just don't have the anger that other people have because I got that benefit. So I understand it's like hard when people hear from me. But like on the other side, I have this tiny, 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 tiny kernel of internet fame, and seeing the way people have dehumanized me and felt the right to me or my time or my content or my thoughts in a way that is so small, it is like a grain of sand to what George R. R. Martin experiences. Like my understanding and sympathy for what that must feel like is just huge, because people cannot understand until they're in it, even in the smallest amount, like how much people do not view you as a human being if they are not in front of you. Some people do not know how to be online. And I just think that has affected a lot of this. People should just think about it a little bit. Before we keep going, I do want to read a couple funny quotes. So these are both from Dream Songs, like I said, in 2003. I'm going to read this quote. Doorways was a script he wrote for TV, just for some context.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you know what quote I'm going to read?
Maybe, I don't know. Okay, yeah.
Doorways will always be the great what if of my career. I wrote other pilots, Black Cluster, The Survivor, Starport, but Doorways was the only one to get beyond the script stage, the only one to be filmed, the only one to come within a whisker of winning a spot on a network's primetime schedule. If it had, who knows? It might have run for 2 episodes or 10 years. I might still be writing and producing the show today, or I might have been fired 2 months into the series. The only certainty is that I would be a much, much richer than I am at present. On the other hand, I would never have finished a Game of Thrones or written the other volumes of A Song of Ice and Fire, so maybe it all turned out for the best after all. I read that quote. I remember where I was sitting when I read that quote, because that is what made me go, when was Dream Songs published? Like, what are we talking about?
I do need to do my own research and figure out the executive that would have canceled Doorways and send him a really strongly worded letter of how much I appreciate him as a human being. Because,
like you did
that's one of those inflection moments.
That's a sliding door. There, you can go watch
or a butterfly effect. Callbacks.
The other thing I wanted to say is a quote that is also in Dream Songs, which is short and sweet. My career is littered with the corpses of dead series.
I feel like requires a lot of context because he has a whole essay talking about how most of his stories are supposed to be a series of stories, like more than you think. Like whatever you think, like, oh, maybe he has like more. It's way more. Like he has a whole list of things. He's like, well, I did this story and then it was going to be a series and I never went back and I did that. And I'm like, George, and look, I think this man has ADHD. And I'm not a doctor. I have no idea what's going on in his brain, but I have ADHD. And I just recognize that feeling of just being like, oh, I like this, but I like this. I like this. And I just like, who knows? I have obviously no idea what his diagnosis could be. It just feels very much like he's like, oh my God, I got to do. And I'm like, I relate to that. And, it just sucks that he wanted to do all these different things.
I mean, the funny thing about that, though, is I want to clear something up because a lot of the stuff that he wanted to write more in, I still think has very satisfying endings. For example, Tough Voyaging to me is a very satisfying beginning and ending. I know he has more. But like a lot of the stuff he says later, he just had such, like you said, grand ideas, like his 1,000 Worlds. He was just going to write tons of stories in the 1,000 Worlds.
Yeah. And like he was going to do more like ideas. Sand King stuff, but it wasn't going to be a sequel to Sand Kings, which stands alone. There's these like shopkeepers in Sand Kings that sell the character of the Sand Kings. And he wanted to do more stories of them on different worlds, just like selling exotic things to people, which would be a series of just like short little stories interconnected. So it's not like, he still wrote endings and like had firm things. It's just,
and good endings.
He would write something and his world builder's brain was always going. He's like, I could do so many more things with this. So many more room for activities.
So many more rooms for activities. So Song of Ice and Fire is 90s and 2000s, and obviously we're here because we love it and we think it's amazing. And I think the whole project gives a lot of perspective on how he got there and how he wrote it. And the one thing that is surprising to me, and you'll know more of this probably, is like there's a part of me that's like, it's kind of random he wrote a Game of Thrones. Like when you look at his previous career and how much shorter the things were, and how his fifth novel, like he just kind of, it went cold because no one would take it. And then to be like, I have this idea for a high fantasy series that's really long and really big. Cause like none of the other,
I don't think
back up here, none of the other stories are long. Like they're all pretty short.
Yeah. I don't think it's surprising because like, as he says a million times, the tale grew in the telling. Like the famous start of A Song of Ice and Fire is he was just like, I don't know, like getting coffee or something. I don't know what he's doing. He just had an inspiration of a pup in the snow and a boy finding, and then he wrote that story. And then like that was in 1991, I think it was when he wrote that. And then he just,
I remember reading that.
He wrote a little bit more, and then he was doing shows, and then he came back, and it kept calling back to him. And so he's probably doing a lot of world building at the time. And I don't know if he's ever said this or if this is the thing he's thought, or like he might have said it somewhere. But I do wonder if one of the reasons he was able to make the story grow so much is he had so much time to think about that story, because he was like, it keeps coming back to him. So maybe he's like building out more and more things. And so when he gets to it, like, maybe when he's like doing Armageddon Reg or Fever Dream or whatever, he has like the 1 year he wants to write a book. And so he thinks about it for that time, because it was supposed to be a trilogy. And, he did that outline, which, had a bunch of way different things in it. And he thought it was going to be a Game of Thrones, Dance with Dragons, and The Winds of Winter was going to be a trilogy. And he thought that like the Red Wedding would be in the first book. So that's where he thought he would be in a Game of Thrones. And I don't remember if he thought that would be the direct ending of, or if he just like, that's near the end, but you can see how far he didn't get in there. So I just think he started adding, and he just did. And we see that all happen with, Feast and Dance, where he adds in more Ironborn and all this stuff. The guy, for better or worse, I think better. Some people think worse. You're wrong, but that's okay. That he really likes to expand the world and build things out. And I think if he did that on a faster time plate, people would have maybe more accepting of it. But I love anything we get of A Song of Ice and Fire. And so when he expands it out, I just think he's like, oh, and I'll add this, and then we need this, and it grew. I think it makes sense. And it's so clearly like in conversation with everything else that he's made that he he's able to like do that. And then the Hedge Knight, I think, is super important, because the Hedge Knight, the lore behind that is that he wanted to get into a collection made by Robert Silverberg, which Robert Silverberg is like one of the most famous editors in SFF. And we saw him very like briefly, didn't talk to him, didn't anything like that at Worldcon. And
you his line, story at Worldcon.
Yeah. And his line for people to meet at Worldcon was huge. One of the biggest. And I just was very surprised. Like, but it's because he's been going there for years. Like he's discovered a lot of authors. Like he's very well respected in the industry. And George was like the baby writer on this. And so he had all these big writers in it. And he wanted to be in it, and he needed a story. And so he was like the 10th writer included, and it was going to be like a big deal. And I know George has spoken about how many people picked up that collection for the other authors in it and then found his story and then went and read a Game of Thrones. So it was like very important to his career that he got in this collection, and he couldn't write anything forward. So he had to go back and he wrote Dunk and Egg. And it's very interesting because there's another Blackfire stuff in there, even though like at the time, like, the Blackfires would have been like, he hadn't fleshed out all of the things that he wanted to bring in yet. And I think having to do that and like set up like what's going on 100 years more beyond just like very basic facts, I think that really helped him expand his thoughts on the world and like bring it into clarity. And he's like, well, 100 years ago, there's all this stuff. And so then we went into A Clash of Kings. He had all this more context, and he built and built and built on it. And maybe he built too far. I don't know. We'll never know. But for better or worse, it's given us this incredibly rich tapestry of story, of world, of character, of theory crafting, and all this stuff. And just love it to death.
Yeah. Amen. I wanted to end on something. I don't know. We'll see. I wanted to talk a little bit about the article, actually.
Okay.
Just because it came out the day we were planning on filming this, and then we had to, change our film date. First,
I was crashing out, folks.
What?
I was crashing out, folks.
Oh, yeah.
It's so funny. I was crashing out so hard that like I was talking to my wife and just like going, I was like, oh my God, he's never going to finish. He's never going to finish. This is ridiculous. And I was just spiraling that my wife, who I've been with for 12 years, turned to me and she said, would it make you feel better if I promised to read a Game of Thrones while I'm on maternity leave? And I looked at her and I was like almost about to cry. I was so upset because this is a very important story to me. And I was like, yes, that would make me feel better.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a day. But what I want to encourage people is based on the way people are talking about the article, it feels clear to me that a lot of people are consuming this article in like tweets and headlines and media about the article, but have not actually read the article. So here's my book-born high horse that I swear I say like at least once a month. Like, I would encourage you to go actually read the article itself, because I do think a lot of the things he said are getting twisted. Like, as someone who read the article, and like Zach, my husband, was talking to me over at the dinner table, and I was like, it sounds like you just read the headline. And now he was like, yes, I have just read headlines. I didn't read the article. Because he was like, whatever. And I was like, then you can't talk. I mean, that's how I crashed out. I was like, everyone's just wrong about this. And
well, okay.
Like,
so there's a part of the article that I think a lot of people have read that I interpret differently.
It's the Sansa thing.
It's the Sansa thing. And I just, guys, okay. All right, I'm going to get on my soapbox and you can get on your soapbox. No. This, like, I think this is like 20% on the interviewer for not making this more clear. And then everybody just misinterpreted. I just fully believe, I will stand on business saying this is misinterpreted entirely. The question that James Hebert asked was, in your original outline, like lots of things changed. Like he's talking about the original outline in which he has like the 5 main characters or whatever. And Sansa's not one of them. And then he asks that question about how much has changed over time. And then George is like, oh yeah, like, I was going to kill Sansa. Like he starts with, I was going to kill a lot of people. I was going to kill Sansa. And then he says, but with how great she was in the show, maybe I'll keep her around. Like, I'm so positive that that's just him. Like, he might not have been like literally joking, but he's just like musing about like, he's either trolling. Like, this is a man who has never given a spoiler for goddamn anything on purpose. Like he did give away that Jon Snow has POVs in the next book, which is really interesting. But generally speaking, you ask him a question about anything. You're like, hey, are we going to see like this like random castle? And like, he's just usually like, I can't tell you things. You're going to find out in the books. And so for people to think he's written 5 books and he's like, now I'm going to change to killing Sansa. I just don't like, you don't understand. Like, that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense. Like, I don't get it. And so many people were like, oh my God, he was going to kill Sansa, but then he changed it because of the show. And it's like, I just fully don't believe that's what it is. And I just wish that had been clearer in the article.
This is what I'm talking about. Like, when you read the article, you really get the tone of it, which is like, the tone is very different than what people are repeating back to me. And that's why I think they've just read like Reddit posts about that he said that, and not the full context of the
I think it would have went a lot differently if the interviewer had just been like, he smirked or like just like wrote something to make it clear that it wasn't that serious. But I think he wanted that to be the headline, like, and that's fair. Like, that's his job.
Yeah.
I just don't believe it.
I don't even want to talk about that specificity of it. What happened to me is like, when I read it again, because I don't have that history, it was like, I was actually just kind of bummed out after reading it, and not for the same reason everyone else was. I was sad because I felt Martin's sadness through the whole thing. Like when he talked about
he is very sad,
wanting to write more Night of the Seven Kingdoms, like that he has those stories in him and that he has tried and it just feels like they won't come out. Like there is this sadness there. And when you only consume it via Reddit post or tweets or whatever it is, you miss like that tone of the whole article. And I feel like that is how the internet is working and how in some ways we've even got here is just like this giant misunderstanding. And so I just wanted to talk about that just because it's topical and I'm not usually topical. And that's why I've left it to the end because I don't want people to think, I don't want people to be
on the topics all the time now.
About anything.
There's a whole undercourse of sadness to that. And, he talks about like dying and how he doesn't have like, he's like, it'll just be a big mystery. And like, I don't have plans. And, he talks about, just like his relationship with the material and how he like, I sit down and I write it. And even in the article, like he's saying that the problem is he sits down to write it. And then he's like, oh, well, this isn't as good. And I change, like the guy cares so much about making it good. And I love it if he just like had somebody there every day. He needs David Goggins. Internet, can we get David Goggins to go? Can we start a petition? Get David Goggins to George R. R. Martin's ranch and be like, I don't know, say some insane shit to David. Do you know who David Goggins is? No. The internet will know. He's like a Navy SEAL. He's crazy, but I mean, like he like runs. He's just this motivate. He's a psychopath, but like goals guy. And anyway, we need somebody like that to be with George and just be like, write for half an hour, George. And
don't edit anything. You can't go back and rewrite anything you used to write.
That's for bitches.
Before we finish up, because we've been going for a little bit, I just wanted to, as a last thing, talk about legacy. A lot of people think his legacy will be ruined if A Song of Ice and Fire is never finished. I do not like to pretend that there's not a chance, only because I think it's rude. Like, George is still alive and well, and we don't know what the years hold. Like, I know there might not be a lot, but we don't know what he's going to write and come. So I'm just talking about his career up until now. But if this was it, if it was, would his career be ruined? I would really be interested on your thoughts. My thoughts on that is no. I don't think it will be. I think it will be ruined for a little bit. And I think the test of time is the fact that A Song of Ice and Fire is one of the most influential and important fantasies that was written. And it will stick whether or not there's an ending.
I could not think anything less that it will ruin his legacy.
You had me in the first half for a second because it sounded like you were about to disagree with me.
No. Several things. First of all, I think when you look at things, first of all, the internet just like is the exaggerated opinion of everything, and then people calm down. Like I'm thinking very recently in a very different situation, people that were like, Stranger Things season 5 is coming out. I've never watched. Who cares? Nobody's going to watch Stranger Things season 5. It's been 27 years since the last season of Stranger Things. Literally nobody's going to watch this. And then it crashed Netflix 3 times. I'm not talking about the quality of the season. I'm not talking about the reception of the season, anything like that. I'm talking about people talking out both sides of their mouth. The people that get angry, but then it does a lot. The people who claim, I hate Nickelback for 25 years. And then every Nickelback sells out stadiums and stuff. I'm not saying these people don't actually exist that dislike these things. I'm saying that people have to say things and then do another thing. Game of Thrones ended season 8. People were like, nobody's ever going to care about Game of Thrones. This is the worst ending of all time, blah, blah, blah. And there's been no revisionist history on the ending of Game of Thrones. Like, people still say, not good. But Game of Thrones is still being rewatched by people. I work with a bunch of like 20-year-olds, like 20 to 25-ish, and 4 of them have watched Game of Thrones this year for the first time and loved it. And that's just in a very small sample size. And so you bring that up, like there's people discovering it all the time. There's people who wanted to wait till it was over. They were too young at the time. There's always going to be people rediscovering it. And the people that were angry at the end, like me and many, many, many other people, they get nostalgia. They go back, they watch earlier seasons. And all I'm bringing that up for is that people say one thing in the moment and that ends up not being true. People right now are very much on this idea that if George ends, it's just going to destroy his legacy. And that's just not true. Like he literally in this article brought up Charles Dickens didn't finish his last novel. And I know that's like very different times, very different situations around it, but that didn't ruin his career. We can talk about a little bit more recently. Robert Jordan died. And I know Brandon Sanderson finished his stuff, but that was not known at the time that would happen. And Robert Jordan had been spinning his wheels for a long time. And then he got sick and then he started on, and then he passed away. And people at the time did not say, well, I'm done with Wheel of Time. like in that moment, it's not clear the series was going to get finished by Brandon Sanderson, but there's not this big outcry against Jordan for spinning his wheels and writing Crossroads of Twilight. People are sad when an author they love dies. And I think that part of humanity and the thing that you love gets lost in that time. And so I do think that when the inevitable day comes that George is no longer with us, sure, there's going to be people. There's always going to be people on the internet that say it's over, he ruined his legacy. But I think a lot of people are going to think about the things that Martin brought them. They're going to think about the impact he's had, and they're going to remember fondly. Maybe not right in that moment all the time, but mostly. And most importantly, more people are going to be discovering A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. They're going to be discovering Game of Thrones. They're going to pick up Fever Dream in a used bookstore. They're going to talk about the books. Like, all this stuff is going to keep going on. And I just think that I do not see any way in which him not finishing will impact his legacy. Octavia Butler did not finish her last series, and nobody mentions that. I mean, they mentioned that maybe it's like, oh, it would have been a shame to see what she finished.
I mean, I'm going to push back one thing, is that those authors you mentioned, other than Robert Jordan, which I think is a really much better one-to-one comparison, didn't have these, like, Octavia Butler didn't have like this show that redefined TV for 2 decades.
Sure. I think that's more of a boon than a negative. And I think people try to paint it as a negative because they're in their feelings, and there's millions of them. And millions
I agree.
Of people
I'm just
have
saying
louder
that's
feelings.
why the conversation is different.
Oh, I totally agree. I'm just pointing out how death changes things. Like, I think once he's gone, the narrative will shift.
I think you're right. I agree with everything you said. And I just want to constantly remind people, he had a retrospective in 2003. People already recognized Martin's mark on the genre, or several genres that he writes in, before he became what he is now. So the idea that he was more important then than he is now is so laughable that it becomes asinine. And I completely agree with you. It's the internet has the internet as a whole, as a collective, the voices don't have very good vision for the long haul. It's always about the right now. And I completely agree with you. So I think his legacy will be far lasting. And it just doesn't really matter. But we can always
one very last thing that I
dream of spring. We can always hope that our winter will end, and dream of that.
Exactly.
Well, everyone, thank you for joining. Kyle, thank you for joining on this discussion and bringing your expertise to us. And thank you for everyone watching who made it this far. Hope you learned something.
Thank you for having me on. And I just want to say thank you for reading A Song of Ice and Fire. I think I speak for many people that say you've brought a lot to the fandom, and your videos are very good all the time. Just like really, really enjoy the passion that you've found in this series. And, I joke with you privately all the time about how, I'm the one that got you, and like, you should thank me, just always being silly, but being serious. It brings me a lot of joy that you found something that you love so much because I thought that you would like it. And so, that really brings me a lot of happiness, and I'm really glad that we could do this all together and like experience this retroactive and then do this video. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's been a really fun journey to have from like that August or July. I think it was July 2023 when I read A Game of Thrones.
And here we are.
And here we are.
The future.
Yeah. I sometimes get weirdly emotional over it, just because The Song of Ice and Fire does mean so much to me now. And also it's just really funny because it's just not anything I could have predicted, because I have like that awesome comment on my top 10 series of all time. Like, here are common ones people ask me about. And, A Song of Ice and Fire is there. And it's like, I'm not reading it because of X, Y, and Z. And so it's really funny to be here. And I also, not to belabor it, but like, think it's another good example about his legacy. Like, it didn't matter that I was 20 years late. Like, I came to it and it changed my life just as much as anyone who had read it at the time. And like, that stuff doesn't have a timeline. So anyway, thank you all for joining us. I hope you learned something, and I hope we have influenced you to pick up something else of George's in the meantime. In the
Sand Kings and Windhaven.
And Fever Dream. Those are the top three.
Yeah, those are the top three.
Those are the top three recs. But if you do, say it in the comments which book you end up picking up and what you think of it. So we'll catch you next time. Bye.
Bye.